Alright guys, now it's time to take a look at Revelation chapter 4. But before we actually jump into the text itself, there's something that's really important that I need you to understand. While we normally look to Revelation as being this great apocryphal book, this great book of describing what's happening at the end, the thing you need to understand is it's not the only book that has this material in it. And to that end, there's a couple of passages I want to take a look at before we jump into Revelation chapter 4 itself, so that you understand what we're talking about when I say that Revelation is different than the Old Testament picture, because the Old Testament one focuses on the Father and Revelation focuses on the saints. So here are the words from Ezekiel chapter 1. As I looked, behold, the stormy wind came out of the north, and a great cloud with brightness around it, and fire flashing forth continually, and in the midst of the fire, as it were, gleaming metal. And from the midst of it came a likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had a human likeness, but each had 4 faces, and each had 4 wings. Their legs were straight, and the soles of their feet were like the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like burnished bronze. Under their wings on the 4 sides they had human hands, and the 4 had their faces and their wings thus. Their wings touched one another. Each one of them went straight forward, without turning as they went. As for their likeness of their faces, each had a human face. The 4 had the face of a lion on the right side, the 4 had the face of an ox on the left side, the 4 had the face of an eagle, and such were their faces. And their wings were spread out. Each of the 4 creatures had 2 wings, each of which touched the wings of the other, while 2 covered their bodies. And each went straight forward. Wherever the Spirit would go, they went, without turning as they went, for their likeness of the living creatures. Their appearance was that of burning coals of fire, like the appearance of torches moving to and fro among the living creatures. And the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning, and the living creatures darted to and fro, like the appearance of a flash of lightning. And now as I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the earth beside the living creatures, one for each of the 4 of them. As for the appearance of the wheel, it was constructed thus. Their appearance was like this, of gleaming of beryl. And the 4 had the same likeness, their appearance and construction being, as it were, a wheel within a wheel. When they went in any of the 4 directions, without turning as they went, and their rims were tall and awesome, and the rims of all 4 were full of eyes all around. And when the living creatures went, the wheels went beside them, and when the living creatures rose from the earth, the wheels rose. Wherever the Spirit wanted to go, they went. And the wheels rose along with them, and the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. Where it went, they went as well. And when it stood, they stood. And when they rose from the earth, those wheels rose along with them, for the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. And over the heads of the living creature there was a likeness of an expanse shining like awe-inspiring crystal spread out above their heads. And under the expanse their wings were stretched out straight, one toward another, and each creature had 2 wings covering its body. And when they went, I heard the sound of their wings like the sound of many waters, like the sound of the Almighty, a sound of tumult, like the sound of an army. And when they stood still, they let down their wings, and there came a voice from above the expanse over their heads. And when they stood still, they let down their wings. And above the expanse over their heads was the likeness of a throne, in appearance like sapphire, and seated above it the likeness of a throne was the likeness of a human appearance. And upward from what the appearance of his waist I saw as it were gleaming metal, like the appearance of fire enclosed all around. And downward from what had the appearance of his waist I saw as it were the appearance of fire, and there was a brightness all around him like the appearance of the bow that is in the clouds on the day of rain. And so was the appearance, the brightness all around. Such was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of God, and when I saw it I fell on my face, and I heard the voice of the one speaking. And again Ezekiel writes later on in chapter 10, he says, And then I looked, and behold, on the expanse over the heads of the cherubim there appeared to be something like sapphire, in appearance like a throne. And he said to the man clothed in linen, Go among the whirling wheels underneath the cherubim. Fill your hands with burning coals between the cherubim, and scatter them out over the city. And he went in before my eyes. Now the cherubim were standing on the south side of the house when the man went in, and the cloud filled the inner court. And the glory of the Lord went up from the cherubim to the threshold of that house, and the house was filled with the clouds, and the court was filled with the brightness of the glory of God. And the sound of the wings of the cherubim was heard as far as the outer court, and the voice of God Almighty when he speaks. And when he commanded the man in fine linen, saying, Take fire between the whirling wheels from between the cherubim, he went in and stood beside a wheel. And the cherubim stretched out his hand between the cherubim to the fire that was between the cherubim, and he took some of it and put it in his hands, that of the man clothed in linen, who took it and went out. The cherubim appeared to have the form of a human hand under his wings. And I looked, and behold, there were 4 wheels beside the cherubim, one beside each cherubim, and their appearance was that of sparkling beryl. And as for their appearance, the 4 had this same likeness, as if the wheel were within a wheel. And when they went in any of the 4 directions, without turning as they went. But in whatever direction the front wheel faced, the others followed without turning as they went. And their whole body, the rims, the spokes, the wheels are full of eyes all around. The wheels, they had 4 of them. As for the wheels, they were called in my hearing the whirling wheels. And every one had 4 faces. The first was the face of a cherub, the second the face of a human, the third the face of a lion, and the fourth the face of an eagle. Right? I know that was a lot of text, but there's a lot of really, really important things that we're going to be talking about that happen in chapter 4 that explain what's going on. So keep this idea in mind, right, of God sitting on the back of the cherubim, right? One who has the face of a human, one has a face of a lion, one has the face of an eagle, right? One has the face of a cherub. They're flying around, they're carrying God on top of them. Interestingly enough, does that sound familiar at all? The cherubim touching wings together. Hopefully you're thinking of the Ark of the Covenant, because that's the very same image that we get from the depiction that God had told Israel to make for his mercy seat. We'll talk some more about that here in a little bit. All right, the second text I want to take a look at is Isaiah chapter 6. This one should hopefully be familiar, but you'll also hear a lot of the same imagery coming to mind as Ezekiel had. Isaiah writes, In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him stood the seraphim. Each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one called to another, saying, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the foundations of the threshold shook with the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke. And I said, Woe is me, I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Then one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a burning coal that he had taken with tongs from the altar. And he touched my mouth and said, Behold, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, your sin atoned for. And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send? Who will go for us? And I said, Here am I, send me. Again, we have another vision of what's going on here in heaven. Isaiah sees the Lord sitting on his throne in heaven, which again we'll talk about as we look at Revelation 4 here in a moment. But you also see the seraphim around the altar leading a hymn of praise, as it were. So again, keep this imagery in mind. Finally, from the book of Daniel, Daniel chapter 7, we hear the following. Daniel writes, And as I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair on his head was like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, and its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000,000 served him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. and the court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. And I looked then because of the sound of the great words that the horn was speaking, and as I looked there was a beast that was killed, and its body was destroyed, given over to be burned with fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, and their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. And I saw this in the night, visions. And behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man. And he came to the Ancient of Days, and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion, and glory, and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. So again, a lot of Old Testament imagery. I know I hit you with a lot of text here, but this is going to be really important when we take a look at Revelation chapter 4 here in a second, because we're going to see these same images come to light, and they'll help you understand what's going on in the Old Testament as we discuss what John sees in the New Testament. So I'm going to cut the recording here. This one hopefully was a little bit on the shorter side. And then we'll take a look at Revelation chapter 4, and we'll start to dive into the text and explain it there.